everyone, it's Ileana, and I have yet another Christmas card to share with you today. I am still trying to work through my paper stash, so I am pulling out the same pad that I've been working with, and this is the Lawn Fawn Perfectly Plaid Petite Paper Pad. So I'm just pulling out all of the plaids that I could find that are Christmassy. I'm going to leave the solid ones for a different project, but in the meantime, I'm going to pull all of these out. I'm going to use the largest rectangle from my Infinity die set from Hero Arts. And I like to use it because for some reason I cannot cut rectangles or squares to be the true rectangle or square. So I did a dry run of this card first, and I did use a stitched rectangle, and for some reason I decided to not use a stitched rectangle for my final one, but I kind of wish I would have. So I am using that dry run sample to line up all my stamps, and I did find it hard to line the stamp up because it was dirty, so I pulled out my ColorBox cleaner and I cleaned off the residue with my tidy towel. And now I'm able to look through my stamp to line it up to make sure that I am straight. Sorry, my head got in the way, but I did have to look right over that so that I could line it up perfectly. Now I am thinking ahead, and so the reason why I am setting up this way is because the Falala is hanging off the edge, and then that way I can just stamp and not have to worry about positioning. I'm cleaning off the tree now because it's also dirty, and I'm just lining it up with my sample that I've made. Once I get that all taken care of, I'm going to start stamping the way that I'm used to, which is basically inking it up with my right hand. First, I'm going to prep my cardstock with my anti-static tool just so that the embossing powder doesn't stick where it's not supposed to when I get to that part. I'm only doing like 5 cards at a time, and that's because I don't want the ink to dry before I put the embossing powder on. And if I do too many cards, then what I end up doing is smearing my embossing powder while it's sitting on my desk. So I just do a few at a time. The embossing powder that I'm using is Brutus Monroe Icicle. I like the Brutus Monroe embossing powders because they melt quickly. So normally I do my inking, color, and then emboss. But I didn't really feel like going through all that trouble, and plus it was such a small area that I was going to be coloring, so this time I decided to emboss first and then do my coloring. I have my heat gun nice and hot, and so now I'm going to I'm going to heat set my embossing, and it goes by rather quickly because it's just a small little area. So I removed all the stamps from my sheet, and now I'm lining up where I want the image to go. Then I can take my stamp and place it over the acetate and line everything up perfect. I did the same steps for the green part of the tree. So I lined everything up, and now I'm set to stamp all of my images with some color. For some of the images, I'm using My Favorite Things Green-Eyed Monster, and for some of the other trees, I'm using the VersaFine Clair in the green OASIS. I just tried to match up the greens closer to whatever the green was in the plaid paper. Now that I have that stamping done, I'm going to switch gears and do a little bit of coloring. I am sharpening my Polychromos pencils with my Orbit pencil sharpener. I decided to use pencils instead of a Copic marker just because the stamp is so petite, the branch is so small that I know that I would color outside of the lines with my Copics, and so I decided to use a pencil because if you mess up with a colored pencil, you could use an eraser, and it just was a lot easier for these little tiny branches. Then of course I get tired of coloring and I go back to stamping. So I'm going to do a couple of the tiny little images at the same time. So I am lining up the hook and one of the lights. And instead of boring you with all of these little bitty stamping, which you get the gist of it. I'm just going to move on to another part of the card. Now I'm going to move on to stamping the sentiment on the inside of my card. I am using this Hutson stamp set called Homespun Holiday. It did have the cutest sentiment that was appropriate for the little Charlie Brown tree that was on the front of the card. It says, "It's not what's under the Christmas tree that counts, it's who's around it." It is a retired stamp set, but I'm sure that there's something similar in your stamp that you can substitute. I am using the Green-Eyed Monster ink from My Favorite Things for the inside, just so that it's not just a black ink. I just wanted to be a little more Christmassy, so I decided to stamp in color. And this is what I love about the MISTI, where you can just do the same thing over and over again and just get a bunch done. It saves so much time. Now I've gotten everything colored and everything done. I did use my polychromos for the ornament and the lights. Now I'm just adding a little bit of clear Wink of Stella over the colored parts of my images, and to make it look like a glossy little Christmas ornament with some shiny lights, I'm adding some glossy accents to all of these. I wanted to add some stars to the top of my tree, so I've taken these veneer stars and I've stuck them to a post-it tape strip, and I'm taping that down to a piece of scrap paper, and I am using my Encore Gold pigment ink to color these. I'm not sure why that one star just doesn't want to stick to the post-it note, so I'm just pushing those down with my craft pick, and now I'm just going to pounce the pigment ink onto these stars to add some color to them. Once the stars are completely dry, I'm just going to add them to my card with some more of that glossy accent glue, and here are my finished cards. Thanks so much for sticking to the very end. Please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Have a great day.